You are listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture with Dr. T. Michael W. Halcomb and Dr. Fredrick J. Long. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello and welcome to Proof Text. I'm Michael Halcomb, and in this episode, we're talking more about Galatians. This has been a long-running series, Fred.
Yeah, I can't even remember when we began, but it's amazing that we're nearing the end of chapter 4, which means that there's only 2 more chapters after that.
Yeah, well,
we're in the thick of it.
Today, yeah, we are in the thick
We're
of
not
it.
stopping now.
Yeah, exactly. We hope you appreciate the audio and now audio-visual commentary we've got going on. This is good stuff. We're at Galatians 4, and particularly in this episode, we're looking at 4:18 and 19. And if you're watching, we got the text pulled up so you can see that. And I'm going to go ahead and read 18, and then we'll stop and discuss it, and then we'll talk about 19 as well. But here we go. Galatians 4:18. Kalonde zeluste. Woo, zeluste. That's an interesting, kind of a tongue twister. Kalonde zeluste in kalo pandote ke me monon indo parineme pros imas. Well, a couple pronunciation things here. I had a little bit of a tongue twister on this one, but what I want to point out is with the Koine pronunciation, when you have a new tav, right, together. So when the new and the tav are grouped and the tav is following the new, it doesn't sound like pantote. It's that tav, actually, it's the one time in Koine Greek where we get something close to a D pronunciation. So it really sounds like pandote. Pandote.
All right.
Yeah. So we have in kalo pandote.
I'll have to remember that.
And then you have it here. These are two different words, but you have the preposition en followed by to, and it becomes endo. Yeah? Endo.
Endo.
So we have it twice in this verse. Pandote, endo. Yeah.
All right. Well.
And I'll point out one more thing. Sorry. You'll notice, and this really doesn't have to necessarily do with Koine pronunciation, but you'll notice that parine has the two tonu, the two accents, and the me has obviously thrown its accent back here. And in I guess it does deal with pronunciation. Whenever we're pronouncing this, we have two things we got to keep in mind. We whenever we see accents in Koine, that's where stress or intonation hits. And if you have two on one word, you do both stresses. And whenever you have this enclitic type situation, you pronounce it as if it's one word. So without the stress, it would sound like this: parineme. With the stress, it would be parineme. Right. So, yeah, a couple things on pronunciation.
So
there.
what? Parineme? That's how you would say it?
Yeah, exactly.
Parineme. Pros.
Parineme.
Yeah.
Parineme. Parineme.
Parineme. Parineme.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Parineme. Yeah.
So verse 18, look for the connector. Look for the conjunction. We have a de. De indicates new development or distinctive development. And we see a kalon. We've been seeing that word a lot. It means like good, but in a like aesthetically good way. One of my doctoral students, finished now, Dr. Luke Post, looked at good words in Paul, like words that meant good. I forget the exact name of his dissertation. It's going to be published with Virtuous Press hopefully soon. But he looked at agathos and its cognates, kalos and the cognates, and there's a distinction. So agathos is good in terms of benefit. Kalos is good in terms of beauty. And there's this kind of, and here there's like a social beauty that this kalos is used to evaluate relationships. And that's kind of a neat concept even to think about is, we're trying to recover beauty, but what does it mean to be beautifully in relationship with one another? Paul has been speaking the truth. We saw previously other people are cutting in and they're trying to cut people out and they're jealous. That's not beautiful. That's bad. And so Paul has been using this word kalos in verse 17. Now he's using the adjective kalon, and he's going to be making a statement about it. He says, kalon is working with this infinitive. To be jealous is good. So there's an implied form of the verb to be. We have to imply that.
You mean zealous?
Yeah.
You said jealous.
What? Yeah, jealous. Oh, okay. What did I say? Oh, zealous. Yeah, zealous. Yeah. Well, I think it's related. Zealous, to be zealous or jealous for something. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. To strive, desire. Zelotes. But jealous. So to be jealous in a good thing, always. Pandota is good, always. So to be jealous or zealous in a good thing is always good. And not only in my presence with you. So not only in my presence. So I think there's an implication here that the Galatians are changing. When Paul is present, they're one way.
Yes.
And it has an appearance of being good, but when he's not present, something bad happens. They're inconsistent. And this relates exactly to what your whole dissertation was about. Change for good, virtue, or change for bad, or just changing. And this is an unvirtuous change according to your taxonomy, and not a good thing. And that's what Paul says. This is not a good thing.
Well, and the way 19 begins, I mean, every parent, and if you're not a parent, like if you've been a kid yourself, right, and everybody has, what it is to be one way when your parents are around and another way when they're not.
Yeah.
Right? When I was young, I could pretty much turn the cussing on and off at will, right? I knew if a parent was around or an adult, the cussing is turned off, but otherwise I can turn it on at will. And he's using that language here at Tech, right?
So when the cats are away, the mice will play, kind of thing. So Paul's away, the mice will play. Yeah, so it's good. So this is so this infinitive. Remember, infinitives are verbal nouns. When they do take an article or an adjective, which we're seeing there's agreement with, it's always neuter singular. So that's why kalon is neuter singular. Kalon de, zelus de. So it is good to be eager or jealous in a good thing always. And not only. And then we have while I am present with you. So the ento parineme is a special use of the infinitive. So we get two different uses. This one is with the preposition en with the article, and that tends to be translated while I am present with you. Yeah. Other uses of other prepositions like dia means because. In this situation, pro with the article infinitive means before. Meta with the article and the infinitive means after. So there's a whole set of, there's probably about 7 or 8 of these. A couple of those are very infrequent. But if you go back to your chapter on infinitives and infinitive uses, so Koine Greek Grammar, if you go to that chapter, I'll summarize those constructions with you. And the object and the subject of the infinitive will both be in the accusative case typically, although sometimes if it's the same subject as the main verb, the subject will actually be the nominative case. But typically you might have two accusatives there, and you have to figure out which one is subject, which one's object. Here we don't have that. The me is functioning as the controlling agent, and so it's, we call it the subject of the infinitive, but I think technically it's described as the accusative of reference or something like that. But in our English translation, we work it out as the subject of the infinitive. So while I am present, so the verb there means to be present. Really means to be
just the compound,
to be
right?
beside.
Like the para plus imi.
Yeah. Para with imi, to be present, to be beside. Yeah. And then the pros, umas. I'm wondering, why pros there. Pros is intriguing me so much because we learn it as to or towards, but there's a lot of times where it means with. And we see that in the prologue of John's gospel, right? The word was in the beginning, in the beginning was the word, and the word was pros ton theon, with God. And so here's pros, and I think it does mark proximity. Proximity, it indicates proximity. And I'm just wondering if there's another preposition that Paul could have used, but this one marks a proximity in a certain kind of way. Yeah.
So how do you translate this second bit here?
And not only while I am present with you. Yeah. So when or while. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So he's calling them out here. He's calling them to the floor. He's,
speaking the truth.
He's dropping the mic. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We talked about that last time. Am I an enemy? If I become an enemy while I'm speaking the truth to you, and then he lays it out here. You're acting one way, and this also. I mean, we already saw this right with Peter in earlier chapters of Galatians, where he was acting one way in one circumstance, and another way in a different circumstance. In that case, he was acting one way with Paul, but he was also acting a different way when he was with Paul and these opponents or the men from James were around.
He confronts him to his face in 2:11 because he was condemned, because he was guilty. A paraphrastic construction. Go back and listen to that, chapter 2:11. And then even Barnabas, and there we have the osta in verse 13. This is back in 2:13. We just looked at an osta, but there back in 2:13 is osta with the infinitive. No, it actually is with the indicative. And when you have osta with the indicative, when it's truly a subordinate clause like it is there, it means in fact. So that in fact also Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. The there is fronted before the word hypocrisy. So we've seen this behavior before. And I think even in that context, if I remember correctly, that this hypocrisy is contagious. It's almost like the king, that one little story about the kings walking around naked and no one tells them. And so everyone's playing along. Hey, the king's walking around naked. And finally, it's like a little child who says, hey, he's naked. So everyone is putting on, like, oh, we don't really notice. And no one says anything. And so it does take a few brave, really courageous individuals. And I tell you, this idea of courage is needed more and more in our day. A loving courage, a friendship that speaks the truth to lying and untruthfulness. And there's such a need today. And to do it with love, persistence and love, and to say, look, I do care for you here, but let's get to the bottom of this, right? I'm not any better than you. We're just not used to confronting each other well. I think People are so
Mm.
we avoid it. We avoid conflict generally, or we don't want to intrude on people's feelings or their space because we're Americans and we all want our freedom and liberty. So we don't want to do that. And then when we do it, we're not real good at it, maybe. And then we just kind of like
Mm.
everyone, it doesn't feel good. And people get their back
Yeah.
up, they get defensive, and then it's not a good situation. So I just think we need to keep leaning into this kind of truth telling, speaking the truth in love, as Paul says in Ephesians. Yeah.
I think too sometimes that can be I don't know, manipulative maybe is the right word. So when I was in seminary, a fellow student of mine asked me to join them for lunch, and so I was I'll join you for lunch, and so went and sat down, met for lunch, carved time out of my day, went and sat down for lunch, and like as we're waiting on the food, he pulls this kind of what a little bit what Paul's pulling maybe, but he goes, now I asked you here because I need to say something, and this might damage our friendship. And I'm like, oh, this is not this is probably not going to go well, and it absolutely damaged our friendship. The guy asked me, "What are you trying to prove?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? What am I trying to prove? Why are you trying to write all these books and go to present all these conference papers? What do you got? What are you trying to prove?"
I remember you telling me, sharing this
So
with me.
Yeah, I'm not trying to prove
Yeah.
anything. I'm just doing what I love to do and is fulfilling to me. I have nothing to prove to anyone. And needless to say, I never went to lunch with that person again, and have it totally ruined the friendship. So I mean, it can, you do it that way, in a manipulative sort of way. It can be very damaging. But yeah, I agree. In a lot of ways that we're not very good at it, and we don't know how to do it. This is maybe related, maybe a little tangential. I'm going to just go with it, and if it's whatever, it is what it is. So yesterday
Is this
I
going to
got a
hurt
phone
our
call.
relationship, Michael?
No, it has
Okay,
nothing to
okay.
do with you. Yeah. So touche. Yeah. So I got a phone call yesterday, and it was from a private number, and I never answer those calls. Usually don't even get through. Like my phone blocks them. This one got through, and for some reason I answered it, and this guy says, "Hey, I found your church website and got this number, and I'm on my lunch break, and I had a question about scripture. I was wondering if you could help me." It's like, "Well, sure." And he proceeds to ask me his question. Immediately, I know this guy's a Jehovah's Witness, just by the way he's talking, and he's trying to argue with me, and I really probably got a dozen words in the whole 20-minute phone call, but he starts telling me, "You call yourself a Greek scholar? You don't know anything about Greek. You're just a heretic," and just going to town on me, mainly trying to get to the doctrine of the Trinity. "You call yourself a pastor? You call yourself a Christian? You're not worthy of either name," and stuff like that the whole time. And so, speaking truth in love, yeah, definitely, that was hateful. Even if he had convinced me of his argument, he was so hateful that I never would have wanted to go to a Jehovah Witness meeting ever.
Yeah.
So he didn't represent. And at the end, this is hilarious. Because I'm telling him, I got to go. His name was Nelson. He said, "I got to go, Nelson." And finally, at the end, he's like, "Would you like to continue this conversation again?" He had the nerve to ask me if I wanted to continue. But yeah, just the way that we do that is so important, right? Like so
Absolutely.
important. And I'm still learning how to get better at it. I've really sucked at it sometimes, but
that's when you call me. That's when you
still
call me
learning.
up, right? Hey, Fred, can you talk to this person?
Right.
There has been some times when you needed to talk for me. I have to
There
admit.
have.
So, yeah, and that first situation that you
say that again. Say that again.
No, what?
You said there have been some times when
you cut me off. Oh, well, I was going to say, that first situation that you're mentioning, it didn't have to go down that way. Like, it could have been reframed differently.
Right.
I think leading with some questions, just like, I'm trying to understand this, but instead of, there was a prejudgment, and like even foretelling this is going to break our relationship. I'm wondering if that move was actually very subtly like setting up a situation where you weren't going to want to continue in the relationship, and therefore he would feel justified in bringing it up. Anyway, the human heart is amazingly deceitful, and like we don't even know always what we're what's motivating us. We just have to be discerning as well. And
right.
Well, anyway, should we do one more verse, and then we'll I think we do it kind of quickly.
Let's do
verse
it.
19.
Verse 19. All right, I'll read. Teknamu, there's that enclitic situation. So we got one stress here, really two. They're both on the epsilon, but it's just one in pronunciation. Teknamu. Us palin odino, mechris u morphothe, Christos en imi.
All right. A syndeton again, and a vocative, a direct address set off by commas, the teknamu. My children, whom again I am laboring, or in the pangs of childbearing, until Christ is formed in you. Until which time, until when Christ is formed in you. Wow, there's a lot going on there. Yeah.
This right here, this is an important word, right? Morphothe, just keeping in what we've talked about. This is a very specific term dealing with change, right? It has to do with that morphing. It's where we get our word from metamorphosis, and you can see that it's a change from now the vicious to the virtuous.
Yeah.
Right. So that's important.
Yeah. So I think I've seen some books talking about Paul the mother, or Paul the nursemaid, or something like that. Paul taking on this metaphor of a female role of giving birth. So that's significant to notice. And then, Christ, the goal of this birthing, like what Paul is doing with his early disciples, is helping them that Christ is what they're formed into. So to see that goal, and it's a corporate goal, Christ formed among you, in you, it's plural. Among is each individual. That's not, he could have used a construction for that. He doesn't. But I think it even though there is an individual formation that occurs of Christ in me, that this does not happen without a context or community. So it's Christ being formed in your community, and it kind of goes along with what was that saying of Wendell Berry, that sin great. Kind of one person sins, it hurts us all. And when everyone sinned, whatever.
Right.
So when Christ is formed in me, simultaneously, that formation of Christ in me is contagious, and that formation is happening to others in my community. And as Christ is being formed in Michael, it's formed in me, because as we relate to each other, we're actually relating in a way that Christ is focus and is central. And so this is a communal kind of phenomenon that's taking place. Yeah.
Yes. It's like, I've heard many Christians just complain about studying scripture, not, they don't have the time. They don't know how to do it. They don't want to do it. And the reality is right. So like I study constantly every day. Like I'm in the scripture every day, hours and hours, every single day. There's not a day that doesn't happen in my life usually. And it's like that cumulative thing that's happening in me is also like cumulative for the local congregation I'm part of, and for the denomination I'm part of, and for the church as a whole. But yeah, specifically, like when I get something added to me, that is in addition, not just to me, but to my local congregation. And so, you know, if we think everyone in the congregation is adding something in that way, suddenly the church is growing in that way, like by leaps and bounds. But if a few people over here or one person isn't doing their part, then it stunts the growth overall,
and
right?
so not everyone is a teacher. Not everyone's an eye or an ear or a mouth. We all have different functions within the body. And so well said, Michael. Yeah, so verse 19, ascendaton, and the vocative sets that off. We're kind of a little bit off kilter. Last time we separated verse 16 and 17. I mean, those were together, but really 17 started a new section. Now it's happening again. Verse 18 is continuing verse 17, and then 19 is starting a new section. It's actually going to happen in our next episode. We got a little bit off by one verse, but it's kind of interesting to see these transitions taking place and the devices that can be present for these transitions, like ascendaton or de, to mark next step in the progression of the unit. So 18 was the next step from 17. We're going to see verse 20 is a de. That's the next step from 19, but 19 is separated from 18. And there's a by that vocative.
Do you want to just do 20 in this episode, or do you want to wait?
I think we should wait because we're going to do one more episode right now. So I do have a quote from Wendell Berry. People use drugs.
All right.
We're on the Wendell Berry little run right now. At least I'm going to start it. People use drugs, illegal or legal, because their lives are intolerably painful or dull. And that is true. Entertainment culture, we're wanting that excitement. Well, following Jesus, this is the sad thing, and living in community and in close community, man, that's intense and exciting. That's not dull when you're working with people.
Yeah.
So I think said is very, very true. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, thanks for that. I'm a little. I was bringing my kids home from school a couple weeks ago, and at my kids' school they have an Old Testament class in the 10th grade, and my daughter was saying all the kids just cannot stand the class because the teacher is so boring, and they cannot stand going to chapel because it's so boring. And thinking, what a travesty to make it following Jesus so boring, worshiping Jesus so boring, and studying scripture so boring. It should be the most like electrifying thing, right? But
yeah, agree.
Yeah. So, anyways, well, thank you all for listening. Thanks for supporting the podcast, and Fred, thanks for your insight and your time. And we hope that you'll share this with others and help us to continue growing this thing.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.